All right. Ohio State going to Maryland. Ohio State, 27.5-point favorite, 3:30 Eastern kick. It's the last one before Michigan. It's the last dress rehearsal if you're a Buckeye. This is one you got to make sure you have all your attention on Maryland. We'll talk about that in a second, but this is sort of that instance where Maryland, they're not super consistent, but they're dangerous. And to play Maryland at home, I promise the atmosphere will be crazy. You are going to get Maryland's best punch. We say it with a lot of these programs, but that's just kind of the fact of the matter. Maryland kind of limping into this game after getting beat up pretty good by Penn State. If they win this game, think about it. If Maryland beats Ohio State, you can take that recruiting with you if you're Mike Locksley. You can talk. You can tell your kids about that if you're on this team. Like, this is, in every sense of the word, their season for Maryland. All right? That's my first question. When it comes to hinge points, what's the psyche of this Ohio State team? Because you have a playoff game really just a week away, and winning this game makes that game a playoff game. If it's a classic look-ahead spot and you don't bring your best, I already said it a couple times, you have every matchup, but Maryland is just dangerous enough to where if you don't bring it, if you don't squash that belief out of that program early, you leave the door open for things to get interesting. Because Maryland has some pieces. We'll talk about this in a second. They have some pieces that could make this thing interesting. Just got beat 30-0 by Penn State. But remember, this is the same Maryland team that actually forced the game against Michigan to come down to an onside kick. So if you don't bring your A game against Maryland, I promise you, they have guys over there that can do some things that could hurt you, especially on the outside. Now, don't get it twisted. Ohio State really owns every matchup. And if Ohio State finds it early, and they hit the throttle gear early in that first and second quarter, you're probably resting your guys up then in the second half. But like I said, if you're not ready to play, if you don't bring that mentality from kick to final whistle, I don't know. Things have gotten interesting against Maryland before. I believe it went to overtime in 2018. Food for thought. Like I said, I keep saying this. Maryland's inconsistent, but they're dangerous. The battle on the outside for the Ohio State secondary is something I'm watching. Because Tagovailoa, brother of Tua Tagovailoa, he's pretty talented. He's a really good dual threat quarterback. There's a lot of good things for them in their system. They have two receivers, Raheem Jarrett and Dante Demas, guys that are going to play on Sunday. All right, Dante Demas is an NFL guy through and through, probably a third, fourth round caliber player. For Ohio State, remember that game against Penn State where Parker Washington had something like 177 yards? I'm just saying. I don't know if Dante Demas is Parker Washington, but he's got the capabilities to hurt you. And if the secondary doesn't come to play, I can just keep saying it. You allow Maryland to hang around, allow them to develop some belief. This would also be really encouraging, I think, for Ohio State in that secondary to have a really solid showing before the big game against Michigan. Don't get it twisted. This is still a ramp-up game for Ohio State. This is, in a lot of ways, like I said, a dress rehearsal before Michigan. I texted Spencer Holbrook over there at Letterman Row, who's a friend of the program, does a phenomenal job on our Ohio State On 3 site. I asked him, what's the point of emphasis this week against Maryland? He said, get through it healthy, get ready for Michigan. So they're getting ready for Michigan and having a strong showing in the secondary where you clean up a lot of those things that you saw early in the year against a good wide receiver at Parker Washington at Penn State. That would, I think, give you a lot more confidence as you head into that game. Because Michigan's going to run the ball for sure, but they got some guys on the outside. And I bet your bottom dollar that J.J. McCarthy and Ronnie Bell and Roman Wilson, they're all going to, they're going to take a few shots in that game. So having a good showing against some solid competition in Maryland, I think would be a huge boost to morale, huge boost to confidence. And you're not having to get up to speed against Michigan. You've already been playing at that level. It's not, okay, we're playing Michigan, now let's bring it in the secondary. No, we brought it against Maryland, we'll bring it against Michigan. Has to start in this game. For this game's sake and for the game against Michigan, all right? Because if they can take that away, you just let that front seven for Ohio State eat. And I say front seven loosely. I understand it's not necessarily always 7 guys in the box, but you hear what I'm saying. You let Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, let them get after it. If they can't throw the football and they have to run it and try to survive that way, it's going to be a long outing for Maryland. Ohio State's one of the best teams in the country, only allowing 3 yards a carry in terms of their rush defense, number 6 in the country. Like, they got some dogs up front. Let them eat. Take away the pass game. Let them get crazy underneath. It's going to be a good day for Ohio State if you can force them to be one-dimensional. This is my overall question for Ohio State when it pertains to this game. You've heard us talk about it before. Ohio State, especially on the offensive side, they have what I like to call a monster gear. Now, what is a monster gear? It just means whenever Ohio State finds it offensively, their rhythm, their tempo, their efficiency, their execution, whenever they find that at a certain point in the game, I don't know if there's a lot of teams in America that can keep up with them. Guys like Marvin Harrison Jr. get going. When their running back room is healthy, they're rolling. How long does it take them to find that monster gear? Because we've seen a couple of times this year, it doesn't always happen in quarter one. Penn State, it happened in the fourth quarter. Iowa, they were up 26-10 at half, but it didn't really hit and really start going until the second half. Michigan State took about a quarter and a half. Like, if Ohio State gets out of the gate slow, you're not really worried long-term about Maryland because you feel confident that, okay, at some point we're going to be able to win this football game. But it does give you some pause, like I mentioned, it gives you some pause for the next week of, okay, now we got to start fast. We haven't started fast the last couple of weeks. How do we start fast in this game? And Indiana's kind of an asterisk next to that because Indiana's not very good. Still credit to Ohio State. But my whole point is, can you get in gear early if you're Ohio State? That's what has to happen. For this game, yes, but for the dress rehearsal's sake, for Michigan in the future, you would like to come off this game saying, okay, we started fast last week and we're ready to roll. In tandem with that, what's the counterpunch for them? We've talked about it a couple times on this program. Marvin Harrison is their alpha dog receiver-wise, and that's great. And if you can't cover him, I wouldn't stop throwing to him either. There's 2 other receivers, though. Emeka Egbuka, Julian Fleming, both really talented players. You have to be at Ohio State and play receiver. Just kind of the way that works. In the month of November, Julian Fleming, 3 catches. Emeka Egbuka, extremely talented, was popping early for Ohio State. He only has 4 catches. I understand the Northwestern game is kind of a wash because it was such crazy weather. But the fact remains, you got to have somebody else offensively in the pass game be a solid number 2 to take some pressure off Marvin Harrison. Like, if Marvin Harrison Jr. is your only guy that you can go to in the pass game, which is funny to say out loud, but we haven't seen it from Ohio State the last couple weeks, it's going to be tricky against Michigan. So I want to see Julian Fleming, Emeka Egbuka step up in a big way and just have a day against Maryland. It's ripe for the picking. I promise you. C.J. Stroud, he's hitting his stride. He's got Heisman aspirations. We're going to talk about that in a second. This needs to be the game where you have a really solid number 2 wide receiver step up. At the same time, and along with that, Dallin Hayden, running back that got the bulk of the carries last week against Indiana, played really well, over 100 yards, about 19 carries. Sounds like Mayan Williams and Travion Henderson are continuing to get healthy. If they can go, I'd love to see them get a couple of carries, but I want Dallin Hayden to carry the load in this game. Because next week, regardless of how healthy you feel Mayan Williams and Travion Henderson are, I think Dallin Hayden may need to have a role. So let's empower him. Let's give him a ton on his plate this week, so when we take some of that off his plate against Michigan, it's like, okay, actually, this is easier than last week, and it's a bigger game. Now I feel more comfortable contributing. I want Dallin Hayden to get the majority of the carries in this football game. And I want to see him thrive and succeed in that fashion to help us against Michigan. Because like I said, this whole game, Maryland, they're not consistent, but they're dangerous. But even more so, this is a dress rehearsal for Michigan. Your last chance to rev the engine before you play Michigan. That's what this is all about. In your last shot before Michigan, do you kind of sputter and wait till the third quarter to really rev the engine and flex your muscle and show your power as Ohio State? Or is it from the very jump? Mind's right. Culture's right. We're ready to roll. Championship mentality. Let's roll quarter 1 and just take care of business. That's what you would hope to see from Ohio State in this game. It's what they would hope internally. It's what I'm positive the Buckeye faithful would hope for. That's what I want to see when watching this game from Ohio State. So as you would imagine, we think Ohio State rolls in this game. Think they win very handily. I do think they get a quick start. I think they understand that it's championship November. They understand who they play next week, and they understand they got to check this one off the list first. So I have Ohio State winning this game and covering this game 43-10. Ohio State. It's all leading up to that big one in Columbus against Michigan, but like I said, we like them to win this game on the road against Maryland. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.